Is it on?
No, but
Is it on?
lights and the liability.
Is it too loud?
No, it's not loud enough.
It's not loud enough.
See,
I think it's too far away.
I was waiting out.
Yesterday was crazy. How about now? Can you hear me now?
Can they hear you in the back?
Can you hear me in the back?
There you go.
You're like, what? Did everybody sign in? Is this all I have today? I said, is this all I have? You are the best of the best. Definitely.
Thanks for your help. They already contacted me and appreciate it.
Throw fruit at them?
Throw it to them. If you hit them, it's working strong. And if you get them, then I'll go buy you lunch.
Okay, so everybody signed in?
Oh, no, sorry.
That's all right. Okay, if you were here yesterday, this training is very redundant, and I'm sorry. We will go through it quickly because you're going to have to watch yesterday's presentation anyway, so you're going to see it. So we're not going, I have to say it again, but since they were back-to-back, it just, yeah, it's a lot to handle. So today, this is for supervisors. That would be all of you, right? My phone's. All right, so today's training, we're going to talk about the drug-free workplace policy and then the role in implementing that policy. Since you guys are supervisors, that is your responsibility. We're going to talk about identifying and investigating crisis situations, recognizing workplace problems that may be related to drugs or alcohol, intervening in problem situations, referring employees who have problems with alcohol and other drugs, protecting employee confidentiality, continuing to supervise employees who have been referred to assistance, and then avoiding enabling and common supervisor traps. That's what we're going to do today. You guys all excited? Okay, so I do not have any fun quizzes today. I know, I'm sorry. We do have, and no drunk monkeys. We do have some other videos, and I do have candy, so if I need to throw things at you, I do have ammo that I can toss your way. And I won't use the grapes. Sorry, Carol. All right, so we have a drug-free workplace policy because it sends a clear message that the use of alcohol and drugs in the workplace is prohibited. Especially being a municipality, it would look very bad for the city if our employees were using while working. Or for that matter, if they're using outside of work, getting to the point of intoxication, and people know they work for the city, it looks bad. So these are things that we need to be concerned about, or you need to be concerned about as supervisors, and you want to make sure that your employees are coming to work, ready to work, and not hungover. It also encourages employees who have problems to seek help voluntarily, and that is a big reason why we have the workplace policy. That's why we have the EAP, which we'll get into later. But we really want people that if they have a problem, we want those individuals getting help because the city wants employees who are productive, and employees are productive when they are not suffering from a drug or alcohol problem. Or at least they're going to be more likely to be productive if they're not suffering from a drug or alcohol problem. Okay, so drug-free workplace policy exists to protect the health and safety of all employees, customers, and the public, to safeguard the employer's assets from theft and destruction, maintain an integrity for the city, and complying with the Drug-Free Workplace Act. This is our policy. We covered it yesterday. Again, you cannot be using illegal drugs, misuse of alcohol, can't sell, purchase, transfer, or possess any illegal drugs. You cannot return to work or arrive to work under the influence of any drug or alcohol. And you cannot misuse, abuse, or obtain or distribute any prescription or over-the-counter medications. So, and again, if you're coming to work high on over-the-counter cough medicine, are you in violation of the drug-free workplace policy? Yes. So just because it's NyQuil doesn't mean it's okay if you're actually impaired by it. The city will not tolerate substance use in violation of this policy, and it is every employee's responsibility to know and understand this policy. As I said yesterday, ignorance is not a defense. Again, employees who come forward voluntarily will get support from the city and assistance. If they fail to seek help or they test positive for a substance, then there's going to be disciplinary action, including up to and including termination. The drug testing is intended to detect problems and deter usage and allow appropriate corrective action. This is why we do the random testing. The city has the right to change the testing protocol at any time. If that happens, they will tell you. Right now? Okay. For alcohol, if you have a blood alcohol content of, or concentration of 0.02 or greater, it will be considered a positive test. So it really doesn't take much to get a 0.02. Any failure or refusal to provide a specimen is in violation of the policy, and again, you are subject to discipline. Any questions on your policy? Super, okay. These are types of testing. I think everyone knows this, especially as a supervisor. We will skip that. Any employee who has found to have a confirmed positive is then will be placed immediately on administrative leave, and again, subject to appropriate discipline or termination. And not everyone will be granted a second chance or a last chance agreement. That's going to be up to the safety service director. So you can't make the assumption of, oh, if I test positive, they'll give me a last chance or a second chance. That's not necessarily the case, and I would not suggest taking that chance. All right. Went over that yesterday. So what are your responsibilities as a supervisor? You need to maintain a safe and secure, productive environment for your employees, correct? Yeah, okay. Yeah, you guys still awake? I know, it's terrible. You should be evaluating and discussing performance with your employees, and you want to treat your employees fairly. And act in a manner that does not or demean or label people. Let me see if I can get this to play. Nope. Let me see. So our conflict resolution, this is something you should be working on as a supervisor, and also trying to get your employees to work on it as well. And hopefully I can get it to play. Oh. Please.
What is it about conflict that makes it so difficult to deal with, and how come good people can turn into such monsters in the face of conflict? The most common way of dealing with conflict is to avoid it. Some people walk away, others get really upset, wind themselves up and attack, and others just get sick or go on stress leave. In fact, it's amazing what people will do in order to avoid conflict and the emotional stress that comes with it. There is a very clever saying that goes like this: denial is not a river in Egypt. Denial is, however, one of the most common problems when it comes to resolving conflict. When confronted with a tense or difficult conflict, too many people smooth it over, bury their head in the sand, and the conflict goes on for another 1, 2, or 3 weeks, months, or even years in some cases. I want to introduce you to a definition of conflict and then give you a pathway for the resolution of conflict. Before I do, I want to say this. For some people, even the word conflict means warfare, dead bodies and blood on the streets, and it's very common for women and men to see anything less than that as not being in conflict at all. So this is a definition that starts at a very low level, because most conflict starts out as very small upsets and builds and grows into a full-scale battle. So here's the definition. Conflict exists when one person has a need of another and that need is not being met. Now don't be fooled by the simplicity of this definition. The resolution of conflict starts from here, and the first step is to express the need. The second step is to find out if the need can or cannot be met. If the need can be met, then we have resolution. If it's a no, then we negotiate to resolve the conflict, or we go into the management of conflict. So here's the problem. Most people go straight from having an unmet need into the management of conflict, bypassing step 1 and step 2 because they are afraid and don't talk to the people who can do something about it. And that's not pretty. In fact, it gets quite ugly. So here's what the management of conflict looks like. Sulking, withdrawing, getting sick, the silent treatment, backstabbing, gossiping, shouting, blocking, being aggressive. and getting angry. So the resolution of conflict starts with expressing your unmet need and then finding out if your unmet need can or cannot be met. If your conflict has escalated to the stage where it's too tough or sensitive or difficult to handle, then you really need to think seriously about involving a neutral third party to help you mediate the dispute, and we can help you out with that. For more information...
Yeah, in this case, that would be Noah. He's our negotiator. But the whole point of that, what have I done? Okay, so as a supervisor, you guys get to deal with conflict, and I hope that you're not, that you don't go into denial and then let it explode. So if you see conflict because you have employees who possibly are suffering from a drug or alcohol problem, it needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed quickly so that it doesn't escalate into something bigger. Which is why you guys make the big bucks, right? Okay. All right. It is not your responsibility as a supervisor to try to diagnose drug or alcohol problems, unless someone in here is, like a social worker or something. Anybody? No? Okay. So you don't get to do that. You're not going to have all the answers, so don't try to. You're not going to be providing counseling or therapy, I would hope. And unless you are, in fact, a police officer, you're not going to be acting as one. So your job as a supervisor is to resolve conflict and to deal with the person who is suffering from a drug or alcohol problem, or really just any sort of performance issue. So our legally sensitive areas that you need to be aware of, you need to be safeguarding the employee's confidentiality. So if they come to you with something, you need to make sure that it stays confidential. You want to make sure that the policy is clearly communicated, establish procedures to thoroughly investigate, which we will get into, provide due process and ample opportunity for response to the allegations. So you can't just say they're guilty and be done with it. You need to ensure quality control and confirmation of positive test results. Again, that's going to be coming from the lab, but I'm sure we are using a reputable company for that. And you want to be conforming to union contracts for police and fire. So you're identifying performance problems and handling potential crises. You need to be able to distinguish between a crisis situation and a performance problem. Not all performance problems are a crisis, and not all performance problems are related to drugs and alcohol. But we're going to just try to liven things up a little bit. Watch another one. Mostly because this is just hilarious. So in this case, this is not a drug or alcohol problem. It is a performance issue.
This is my associate, Bob Porter.
Oh, hi, Bob. Bob?
Why don't you go ahead and grab a seat and join us for a minute or two. You see, what we're actually trying to do here is we're trying to get a feel for how people spend their day at work. So if you would you walk us through a typical day for you?
Yeah.
Great.
Well, I generally come in at least 15 minutes late. I use the side door. That way Lumberg can't see me. And after that, I just sort of space out for about an hour. Till
Space out?
Yeah. I just stare at my desk. But it looks like I'm working. I do that for probably another hour after lunch, too. I'd say in a given week, I probably only do about 15 minutes of real, actual work.
Peter, would you be a good sport and indulge us and just tell us a little more?
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you something about TPS reports.
TPS stands for?
The thing is, Bob, it's not that I'm lazy. It's that I just don't care.
Don't care?
It's a problem of motivation, all right? Now, if I work my ass off and Initech ships a few extra units, I don't see another dime. So where's the motivation? And here's something else, Bob. I have 8 different bosses right now.
Beg your pardon?
8 bosses.
8?
8, Bob. So that means that when I make a mistake, I have 8 different people coming by to tell me about it. That's my only real motivation, is not to be hassled. That and the fear of losing my job. But you know, Bob, that'll only make someone work just hard enough not to get fired.
Would you bear with me for just a second, please?
Okay.
What if, and believe me, this is so hypothetical, but what if you were offered some kind of a stock option equity sharing program? Would that do anything for you?
I don't know, I guess. Listen, I'm gonna go. It's been really nice talking to both of you guys.
Absolutely. The pleasure's all on this side of the table, trust me.
Good luck with your layoffs, all right? I hope your firings go really well.
Excellent. Great.
Wow.
Okay, so obviously not a drug or alcohol problem. That is just a performance issue, a management issue, and a little bit of humor. Okay, so a crisis situation would be dangerous behavior, threatening behavior, obvious impairment, possession of alcohol or other drugs, and illegal activity. So this kind of stuff occurring in the workplace is not acceptable, and action needs to be taken immediately. Questions to consider. So you would have to do an investigation into the potential drug or alcohol situation. So what do you see? And this is all stuff that you need to be documenting. And don't wait a day or two to write it down. You need to be doing it as it happens. So what do you see? Does there appear to be illegal activity, policy violations, unusual behavior taking place? Is there a group of people involved, or is it just a single employee? Are you the direct supervisor to anyone involved in the incident? Are there reliable witnesses available? And is there any physical danger involved in taking action or not taking action? If someone is impaired at work, you need to be taking action, because obviously there is a danger in not taking action, especially someone who's driving. So you do not want to put that off. But if it's, again, just maybe they're coming in hungover, is there a danger to not taking action? Maybe not, but it needs to be addressed. But if someone is impaired, you need to take action immediately. Is the situation serious enough to require calling law enforcement, which I would hope that you guys feel comfortable in calling us if need be. Again, you would probably be calling NOAA first, and then NOAA would be contacting us. Is there a specific policy that applies to the situation? Again, these are all things that you need to be documenting. Does the situation require expert consultation? Again, we have NOAA. And does it require, or does it call for reasonable suspicion testing? We're going to go over the reasonable suspicion testing in just a bit, because I think that's been a question for some. And then have you documented what you see and what you've done in response? Again, documentation is very important, especially when we're talking discipline, possibly termination. You want to have all your ducks in a row. So your recommended actions when confronting somebody with a possible drug or alcohol problem. Take them into a private area. Don't confront them in front of the rest of their coworkers. And then have another supervisor with you so that they act as your witness. You want to talk or ask them about the behavior or rumor or report, whatever is going on, whatever information you have. Inform them of your concerns. Don't make accusations. You want to state it as, I have this concern, we need to talk about it, not, I know you're drunk, because what's that going to do? Make them mad. Okay, and then you're not going to get anywhere, you just shut it down. You want to get his or her explanation of what's going on. And then if you feel that there's a problem, you want to notify your superior. Again, you need to take it up the chain. Is there evidence or suspicion of recent use based on the employee's response in your drug-free workplace policy? The supervisor should refer your employee to the EPA. Again, we use Tri-Health. Employees and their family or dependents can get up to 10 visits a year, so that's a good resource. You want to place the employee on suspension until a formal investigation takes place. Arrange for the employee to be escorted home. If you think the individual is under the influence of drugs or alcohol, do not send them home in their vehicle, because what have you just done? Put an intoxicated driver on the road, right? Does that make any sense? No. So if you're sending them home because you think they're intoxicated, somebody needs to be taking them home. And you want to, and if you're sending them for a drug test because you think they're intoxicated, you need to be escorting them to the collection site. The reasonable suspicion testing. Supervisor has reason to suspect an employee may be in violation. The suspicion must be documented in writing no less than 24 hours following the event or just prior to the release of the test results. So again, documentation is very important. And it does not require certainty, but mere hunches are not sufficient. So if you have reason to believe, if you smell alcohol on the person, if they're exhibiting signs that maybe they were using prescription pain meds, but they're actually to the point of being intoxicated or, high on them, then you would want to do testing. You want to observe their behavior. So did anybody see them using? Did you see them using? Do they have physical symptoms? Again, these are all things you should be documenting. Is there a pattern of abnormal conduct or erratic behavior? Do they always come back from lunch? And maybe their speech is slurred or they're clumsy, things like that. Or if you have newly discovered evidence that an employee has tampered with a previous drug or alcohol test, you would want to test again. And again, that was back in our drug testing policy. If you think someone has tampered with a sample or another employee or someone else is actually supplying a sample for them, then that is obviously a violation. And if it's another employee that's helping them, then they're in violation as well. If someone has been arrested or convicted of a drug-related offense, or they've been identified as a focus of a criminal investigation into illegal drug possession, use, manufacture, or distribution, the employee needs to notify their department manager prior to the beginning of the next scheduled shift. So if your employee is arrested, they need to be coming for a drug or alcohol incident, or really for anything. They need to be letting you know as soon as their next shift starts. And then any information that's provided either by a reliable or credible source or independently corroborated regarding the employee's substance use, possession, manufacture, distribution. So maybe a spouse comes in and says, look, this is what's been going on. He or she won't get help, but I know they've been using at work or they're using before work or whatever. Then that's credible information, assuming that they're not in the middle of some nasty divorce, in which case you might want some more information to back that up. So recognizing the problem, addiction. Again, we talked about this yesterday. It's when it's no longer just using to relax or using for social reasons. It's become a compulsion where you have to use, and the consequences of the use, it doesn't matter anymore. So to that individual, it doesn't matter if they lose their job. It doesn't matter if they're losing their family. The drug or the alcohol is more important, and they continue using regardless of the consequences. So our ongoing performance problems that do not respond to normal supervisory actions may be signs of addiction. So you've had a performance issue with someone, you've tried the normal routes, it's not working. At that point, it could be that there's a drug or alcohol problem. So poor attendance, tardiness, unexplained absences, long lunches, using lots of sick time, coworkers or customer complaints. So if you have a coworker coming to you saying, they're never doing their work, they're never finishing anything on time, they're leaving early, they're falling asleep, or there are mistakes and missed deadlines, these are all indicators. Again, though, if someone is having problems, don't just assume that it's a drug or alcohol problem. It could be that there's something else going on. Maybe there's family issues, maybe somebody's really sick. I mean, there's all sorts of things that happen in people's lives that would disrupt their work. So don't make the assumption or don't jump to, oh, it's drugs and alcohol, because it could be other things, which is why it's important that you have a good rapport with your employees so that maybe they come and talk to you about it. So your intervention and referral. You want to, again, document the performance problem and get yourself ready. So have your notes, know what you're going to say. Be prepared, have a nice setting. Like If you're going to bring them into your office, like my office right now is a cluttered mess. I would never bring anybody into my office for a sit-down meeting on their performance, because they would look at me like, really, you're going to talk to me about performance and this is what you have going on in your world? So make sure that your environment is clean and you look professional so that when you address this issue, you look like the professional. Set the stage, use constructive confrontation. Again, the whole accusation, pointing fingers, that's not going to do any good. All it's going to do is shut the person down. Refer them to assistance, again, the EAP, and then follow the progress. So don't just make a referral to the EAP and then just stop there. Because if there's no follow-up, then that person may say, well, sure, I went to the EAP once and I'm not going back. Then they think, well, I pulled one over on them. You want to follow up to make sure that they're following through and making sure that their performance actually improves, since that is the whole goal of this. You want to tell your employee that you're concerned, so that, again, that constructive confrontation. State the problem. Let them know exactly what they're doing wrong. I can say that if someone has to guess on what they're doing wrong, that would be frustrating. Like, just tell me what's wrong. Refer to documentation. Again, I would hope that if you're seeing performance issues that you're actually documenting the things that are going on. So actually go back to your notes. Well, on this day, go back to it. You want to avoid the overgeneralizations. You can't just say, well, your performance has been an issue. Well, how so? If you can't back it up, then you're not doing your job. And then ask for explanation. What's going on? Is it because they have a drug or alcohol problem? Or maybe they've been coming in late to work because they've had a sick child at home and they can't get them to the child care provider on time. Okay, so ask. You want to avoid getting involved in discussions of personal problems. Again, you are not their therapist. So you want to find out what's going on, but then don't let it turn into a therapy session. You want to get the employee to acknowledge that that what you see is a problem. So they may realize it's a problem, and if you can get them to acknowledge it, then they're going to be well on their way to hopefully fixing it. You need to be stating what needs to be done to correct the problem, so that action plan on how to fix their behavior or their performance, and then set a time frame. So don't just say, I'm trying to think of something that would be going on. Like for me, you need to do more Facebook posts. Okay. But until you tell me when or how many, I might be like, oh, I can do one next week, right? That's more, isn't it? Yeah. So be specific. And then specify the consequences. Let them know what's going to happen if it continues. So this video is hilarious. Actually not, but it is a really good example of how to confront somebody, which is why I play it. If it plays.
Jim, I'd like to have a talk with you. Can I see you in my office tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock? But be sure you punch in first.
Yeah, Hank, I'll be there.
Great, I'll see you then.
Okay. What's up, Hank?
Jim, you've been with me for 3 years. I've considered you a valuable employee. And on the whole, your performance has been good. But for the past 3 months, Jim, it's been downright horrible.
Horrible, Hank? Isn't horrible a little strong, Hank?
Jim, I have obligations to my customers and I have obligations to my employees. And your performance is costing me in both those areas.
Well, how? What?
Well, let's see. October 7, 1 hour late, car trouble. Had to keep Nancy overtime. October 9, Nancy called me over. Nothing stocked. Place was dirty. October 15, called in sick, sinus headache. October 20, 3 phone calls from customers complaining about you, saying you were insulting. November 1, dropped 2 bottles. Lost grip on shaker drink, so customer, cost me a new suit. November 3, called in sick, sinus headache. November 8, 2 hours late, finally called in, car broke down, will not be in. November 10, drinks for the wait staff mixed up. Gloria ended up in tears. You called her a stupid, ignorant bitch. November 22, lost 2 customers waiting for a table. They inquired of you about a drink order, and you told them that if they didn't like the speed at which you worked, they could leave. December 3, bar filthy, nothing stocked, fruit left out all night, drawer not cashed out. December 10, called in sick, sinus headache. That's the last 3 months, Jim.
Hank, I don't even remember half that stuff. You write all that down?
Yes, Jim, and I also write down positive things. But for the past 3 months, there hasn't been anything positive to write down about you. I've just got to have better performance. If your performance doesn't improve, I'm going to have to go through the disciplinary procedures, and you'll be out of a job.
Oh, yeah. I need my job.
Jim, if there's anything I can do, I mean, I can try to change your hours or maybe change your shift. Is there anything I can do?
Oh, thanks. It's none of those things.
Jim, you remember about 3 months ago, Perry came over from Family and Children's Service and talked about the Employee Assistance Program?
Was that employee meeting?
Yeah. I contract with them to provide an employee assistance program for my employees and their families who might be having some personal problems. Now, if there's some problems going on in your life that you need some help with, maybe they can help you out, Jim. They provide this service. It's completely confidential, and there's no cost to you whatsoever.
Not everybody's going to have the time to document that much, and really that man was the most patient employer, I think, because there was a lot there. I feel like if I would have been his boss, he would have been fired a while ago. But he documented everything, and then and he told him exactly what would happen. If you don't work through this, then you're going to be terminated. So that is just an example of a meeting that you would want to have if you're having performance issues with an employee. So protecting confidentiality. Again, you want to make sure that the employee knows that the problems will not be made public. Conversations with an EAP, again, will be private and protected, and all information related to performance issues will be maintained in his or her personnel file. That does not mean like the referral to the EAP, that all the EAP information, that's not going to go in the personnel file, just performance issues. Okay, I just said that. Treatment information will be kept separate. Information about treatment for addiction or mental illness is not a matter of public record, so it cannot be shared without a signed release from the employee. And since I teach the mental health first aid class, I've heard people ask those questions where they truly thought that if they used their EAP, that, and this was somebody who worked for the state, they felt like if they used their EAP that it would be reported back to their employer, and that would somehow then show up in their personnel file and be a matter of public record. This was and it was a parole officer. So I had a group of parole officers, and they truly thought that if they got, or if they went and talked to somebody with, in therapy or counseling, that it's going to go in their personnel file. And they pretty much refused to go, even though a lot of them were dealing with a lot of stressful situations. They pretty much said, no, I don't feel like it'll be guaranteed that it'll be safe. And that's really sad, because they needed that help. So it is, in fact, confidential. It's not going to go in your file. It's not public record. So make sure that your employees understand that. If an employee chooses to tell coworkers about his or her private concerns or issues going on, that's their decision. But just because they discuss it with their coworkers does not give you the right to then discuss it with them. Again, you have to maintain that confidentiality. Again, employees should be assured that EAP records are separate from personnel records. and only accessed with a signed release. EAP professionals are bound by a code of conduct or code of ethics to protect confidentiality. There are some limits, again, if someone makes a threat of suicide or any suicidal or homicidal statements, they would have to take action. If abuse is reported, they would have to take action. But as long as those things don't occur, that session would be confidential. If an employee is referred to an EAP after a positive drug test, the EAP professional would report back that yes, the employee is coming, but they're not going to give a whole bunch of information. I think we know all of that. As a supervisor, you need to make sure that you continue feedback about the behavior and performance. So if you see improvements, let them know that you see improvements. If you're not seeing improvements, let them know you're not seeing improvements, and then what the next steps are. You want to encourage follow through and continuing care. You want to make sure that you have accurate performance appraisals and fair treatment. So maybe you're really frustrated with this employee and you're just sick and tired of them. Does that mean you can kind of forget about them and not be fair? Nope, sorry. You get to deal with it. You're the supervisor. And make sure that you're giving them adequate time to adjust to doing things differently because they've been having issues. It's going to take them, it may take some time to get them back on track. So try to be patient, try to give them some time to adjust. But again, don't enable. If you see that they're not following through, if they're not making changes, you need to take action. You want to make sure you maintain open lines of communication, and then make sure you're taking corrective action if old behaviors appear. So if all of a sudden they're doing well and then they kind of fall back into old habits, you need to make sure that you're addressing that. One of the things, when we talk about addiction, it's always a cycle. And so that cycle of change, it usually starts with you think about it, right? So let's say you want to start an exercise program. You think about, yeah, I probably should start an exercise program, but I don't know. And then one day you get really motivated and you really plan it out, and maybe you join a gym and you have a schedule set up and you're ready to go. And then you actually start going to the gym, right? So you're doing well. But then maybe you get sick. And so you miss the gym a couple days. And then all of a sudden you fall right back into old habits of, oh, I so much prefer to sleep in, and you stop going to the gym, right? What's it take for you to get back into that cycle? Get back into that habit of going to the gym. Sometimes it requires somebody to just hit rock bottom again, or sometimes it'll only take a few days and they're like, oh, I got to get back on it. But that cycle is the same for anything when we're talking about change. So whether it's trying to start an exercise program or trying to stop using tobacco or alcohol or some drug or whatever the case may be, they may relapse. So keep that in mind. If you see it, you need to address it so you can try to get them back on track quickly instead of having them hit rock bottom. We want to make a quick cycle back. Okay, so enabling. These are examples of things you don't want to do. You don't want to be covering up any issues with the employee, rationalizing their behavior, withdrawing or avoiding. So you're like, you know what, I'm so done with this person, I'm just going to avoid them. Okay, not a good idea, because just because you're avoiding them, what's everybody else doing? They still have to work with them, right? Okay. You do not want to blame. Sometimes people will try to blame themselves. Well, it's my fault. I'm not a good enough supervisor. This is why they're doing it. No. If they have a drug or alcohol problem, that is their problem, and they need to address it. But as a supervisor, it is your job to make sure that you're offering services so that they can get help. Don't try to control. In other words, like trying to take responsibility. Like if they miss a deadline, don't try to then, oh, I'll extend the deadline. That's not helping any. And don't threaten them. Okay, threats don't work. Supervisor traps. They may try to gain some sympathy. Like, oh, woe is me, feel bad for me. Don't fall for that. Don't accept their excuses. Their apologies of, oh, I'm so sorry, it'll never happen again. These are things that people will do. Diversions, my kids do this to me. Like one kid does one thing and then he's like, oh, but he did that. No. Okay, I know what you did, I'm going to address that. The plea of innocence, saying, oh, they're just out to get me, they're framing me or whatever. Or using anger where they get really upset and throw a fit, again, a lot of times as a diversion. Make them feel sorry for, or make you feel sorry for them again, and then the whole tears thing, the crying. These are all traps. Do's. You want to emphasize that you are concerned. You want to make sure that you have documentation. Remember that many problems get worse without assistance, so you are helping them by trying to lead them in the right direction. Again, emphasize that those conversations with the EAP are confidential. And it is voluntary, but it's there to help the employee. And then help them with making a referral. Sometimes when we hit a bad place in life, simple things like making a phone call, it's not that simple. So you can help by making that phone call or giving them that phone number. So little things can go a long ways. You don't want to try to diagnose the problem. You don't want to moralize, limit comments to job performance and conduct only. Don't discuss drug and alcohol use. Just stick to the performance issues. Don't be misled by sympathy-evoking tactics. Don't try to cover up. And don't make threats. Okay, so that is that. We're going to end it on this, if I can get this to play. This is all, a lot of this I think is common sense, but sometimes we don't like being the bad guy. If you're not capable of pulling somebody in and saying, hey, this is what I see, then you need to find someone who is. Because if you don't address the problem, it's only going to get worse. But if you do pull someone in to address the problem, you do not want to do it like this. All right.
So, why you pick this class anyway? It's pretty hard. Oh, beautiful view. All right.
All right. All right. Y'all shut up now. Now, last week, we talked about the physiology of the animal brain as it pertains to aggression. Now, is there anyone here that can tell me why most alligators are abnormally aggressive?
I know the answer to this question. Raise your hand.
Anybody? Anyone? Yes or you, sir?
Mama says that alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth but no toothbrush.
Your mama said it. Alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth and no toothbrush. Wow. Anybody else? Yes, sir, you, sir.
Alligators are aggressive because of an enlarged medulla oblongata. It's the sector of the brain which controls aggressive behavior.
That is correct. The medulla oblongata.
But Mama said...
The medulla oblongata is where anger, jealousy, and aggression come from. Now, is there anybody here can tell me where happiness comes from?
No.
Anyone?
Oh.
All right. Let's hear what Mama has to say on the subject.
Mama say that happiness is from magic rays of sunshine that come down when you're feeling blue.
Well, folks, Mama's wrong again.
No, Colonel Sanders, you're wrong. Mama's right.
Mama's right. Mama's right. Something wrong with his medulla oblongata.
It's okay to fight back. Coach Klein said I could. Mr. Coach Klein.
Okay, so that is not how you want to confront somebody. And, you know, the professor there was out of line as well because he was, you know, kind of instigated that. So be respectful and don't let it fester or else you'll end up tackling your employee or something like that, and that's no good, so that'll get you in trouble. So not only will you be in trouble, but or your employee will be in trouble, but so will you. So that is today's wonderful, or this year's wonderful lesson. Do you guys have any questions? No? All right, you're free to go.